Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Dean Woodbeck with InCommon, and I'd like to welcome you to IAM Online. And it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Keith Hazelton with Internet 2. Keith?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's IAM Online, the monthly webinar focused on identity and access management. IAM Online is brought to you by InCommon, Internet 2, and the EDUCAUSE Higher Education Information Security Council. During today's webinar, we're taking questions and comments using Zoom and its chat function. You see a little chat button along the bottom, hopefully. If you click that, it'll bring up a little window for the chat, and you can see that the default setting is sent to the presenters. It says to all presenters in a little blue button. And that's probably a good idea for your questions. In other words, you hear something that you'd like to ask about, and we strongly encourage this, by the way, since it's better to make things interactive. So please do. And then we, the moderators, will keep an eye on that and then pose the questions to the presenters as they go. Our three presenters today represent members of the 2020 cohort of the Collaboration Success Program run by InCommon. And they'll be showing how the InCommon Trusted Access Platform initiative is playing a role in their IAM projects on campus. The InCommon Trusted Access Platform is a collection of both software components, many of them familiar to InCommon Internet 2 participants, SHIB and Grouper. But in addition to the software components, there are collections of good advice, best advice on how to use those, integrate them all together, and connect them to campus resources and sources of information. So each of the people will be talking about their own example, and we'll start with Ethan Crumhut from UNC Chapel Hill. Ethan?
Thank you, Keith, as I find my mute button. Ethan Crumhout from UNC Chapel Hill. Dean, you can go on to the next slide. So coming into the Collaboration Success Program, UNC is already a pretty heavy user of a couple of the Trusted Access Platform components. Been running Grouper and Shibboleth for about a decade, a little longer in the case of Shibboleth. And we've been really successful with it. It's been working very well for us. And we've been able to keep those components up to date as adoption of them becomes more and more widespread. So our main goal for the CSP was to roll out Midpoint. We don't have a good general purpose provisioning engine. We do, provision our directories and Kerberos and things like that, but we didn't have kind of a tool that we could just plug additional things into. So we saw Midpoint as a real benefit to campus. We can bring that online. Our initial provisioning target is Google, because we're also just beginning to roll out GCP at scale, particularly for researchers. So it seemed like a good opportunity to bring up a provisioning engine and a provisioning target together. And we want to plug this into our existing grouper structure, where we're trying to craft access policies that kind of follow a little bit of the guidelines of the grouper deployment guide. Next slide, Dean. And kind of where we find ourselves on a similar journey with a number of campuses in the CSP, and that we're working on Midpoint, but we find ourselves particularly closely aligned with work that Internet 2 is doing internally, or InCommon is doing internally, to roll out the Trusted Access Platform, in that we want to use Grouper for access policy, and that means provisioning decisions get made in Grouper. Then we want that to be communicated to Midpoint. It can then take provisioning actions on behalf of the university. So in Internet 2's case, they've got groups going through Midpoint and being published to Open LDAP. And in our case, it's just a little bit different, that we're going from Grouper to Midpoint to Google. At least at this point in time, we're still directly provisioning our LDAP and AD from Grouper. Next slide. And hopefully this isn't too much of an eye chart, but this basically is representing what we're trying to do with Midpoint. And if you kind of start from, we're using altogether 4 different connectors in this process. If you kind of start from the upper left of the diagram, we have a SCIM2 based identity service, REST service at UNC. And that's where we're going to drive our initial creation of people in Midpoint from. So we I wrote a very, very simple connector to pull those users from that REST service and populate them in the Midpoint registry. Carries, I think, a total of 4 attributes at this point. It's just what we needed to get started. And then we bring in additional data from our LDAP directory. So, we want to add things like names, email addresses, eduperson affiliation into Midpoint for it to be able to provision those things out to provisioning targets. And then the grouper connector that was added just last year, thanks to InCommon and Evolvium. And we want to use that to drive some of these app groups into Midpoint so that provisioning decisions can be made on them. And what we do is we use Grouper to populate organization memberships. So we'll have an organizational hierarchy that kind of reflects what's in Grouper. And then we use an archetype that it induces from those memberships and applies a meta role that then results in the publishing of data to Google. So the archetype is a little bit of a new component of Midpoint, and using it is proving interesting. It's a little bit complex and a little bit new to everyone, but it does allow you to sort of sync these items between these organizational memberships and apply these what Midpoint calls meta roles that then in turn contain make assignment decisions into Google. So with that, we're populating users into Google. We're creating groups that correspond to those grouper groups, and then also populating those memberships out to Google. I should say this is our current direction, and up until the last 48 hours, we're feeling fairly good about it. I think us and the folks at Internet 2 are finding that some of our group membership removals aren't currently working. And so we may have to simplify down and choose a different direction, but this is how we're provisioned right now. And I guess I can pass this back to Keith, and unless there's some questions.
Yep, no questions at this point, Ethan. So I think we can go right to Lacey.
Hey, yes, this is Lacey Vickery from UNC Charlotte, and we actually got started with the Collaboration Success Program this past fall, and we've been heavy Shibboleth users, so it kind of made sense to stick with some InCommon tools. If you want to go ahead to the next slide, go ahead and do that. So yeah, we already were heavily invested in Shibboleth, like I mentioned, and we kind of stumbled upon the Collaboration Success Program while we were looking for a new tool to serve as our main kind of registry for person data. Initially, the idea was to get people out of Banner that didn't need to be there, like sponsored guests. But we also knew that we needed something a little more robust for groups and group management. Campus had been using Active Directory and ADUC with local IT people keeping groups up to date, and the Active Directory administrators were hoping to move away from that. The provisioning system that we were using on campus was handling some group membership, but wasn't really wasn't its strong suit, so it kind of had reached its maximum potential there. So we knew Grouper was something that we were going to be looking at in the future, and when the CSP came online, we jumped on the opportunity, hoping that that would help us fast track Grouper into production here. And in the long term, we hope to also have co-manage in play, but for this current CSP cycle, we're just looking at Grouper. And our first use case is to use Grouper in collaboration with Shibboleth to deny access at the IDP for certain applications that can't block access and may have licensing seats. GitHub is our first app that we're hoping to do that with, because currently we have no way of blocking access. Anyone who can authenticate into GitHub pretty much gets a seat. So we'll use and the policy enforcement point in Shibboleth to go ahead and block people from getting access, and also to present a consistent error screen for people. I think next slide. And so far, our access management policies have been, like I said, kind of all over the place. And we've been using the Collaboration Success Program to just kind of get an understanding of what other schools are doing, what the Trusted Access Platform components consist of. It was a little fuzzy, I think, where different tools shined versus others, like provisioning and deprovisioning could be done in Grouper as well as Midpoint. So we kind of use this opportunity to get a better feel for the different components and what ones we could use here and what ones maybe we don't need. And also moving to Docker was a new experience for us. We don't currently have any production services in Docker, but that's definitely made it easier to adopt at least Grouper, and we're going to be moving Shibboleth to Docker in the near future. So yeah, Grouper will eventually be used to handle access decisions, and then Midpoint will pick up those queues and handle provisioning to downstream systems. That's kind of what I mentioned. Eventually, we'll be looking at Midpoint and co-manage too. And next slide. This is just kind of an overview of our current model where everything is flowing through Banner, and what we hope to get to eventually is to have co-manage handling sponsored guests and all the downstream systems looking off of co-manage and the identity registry, in which the identity registry is also going to be a new sort of feature that we're rolling out as part of the CSP program. Currently, like I said, we have everyone in Banner provisioning to, and then eventually getting into Active Directory. So we'll have this new central identity registry that will be very beneficial in the future to getting people out of Banner. So that was a big accomplishment to also get done in this CSP timeline. And then the next slide is where we hope to be at the hopefully end of the year, or we're not exactly sure how long it'll take to get co-manage in the mix, but co-manage and Midpoint, Grouper, and Shib, pretty much all of the components are in the very last diagram there, and really getting people out of Banner that don't need to be in Banner is our ultimate goal, and providing better access management through Grouper and better visualization. And the other huge thing of Grouper is obviously allowing the distributed access management to fall more on local IT. So that's kind of an overview of our access management project.
So Lacey,
Any
if
questions?
yeah, Lacey, you were talking a bit about Docker, and I'm wondering there may be some folks on the group that aren't quite sure what role that plays in the picture. So if you could give a few words about that.
Sure. From what I understand, this is Docker being new to the InCommon Trusted Access Platform. It basically allows different institutions to just download an image that has all of the services and components needed for a particular product installed and configured. And so as long as you're familiar with containers and running Docker, it really should simplify the installation process. We didn't have Grouper before. We do have Shibboleth currently in production in a non-Docker environment, and I'm really looking forward to moving that to Docker to lessen a lot of the config management burden. So I feel like that's a very strong way to go. Our institution is not fully there yet with Docker and orchestration, but we are able to still leverage a lot of the Docker benefits just within VMware and basically having Docker running on top of a VM. So in the future, hopefully orchestration will make that even more of a streamlined process, but that's what we have now.
Sounds good. Here's a question from Andy Fleming. Do the pre-built containers provided support IPv6, and or have you been able to front end it in a way to provide dual stack IPv4 and v6 access?
Oh, I'm not sure about that one. That might be a better question for one of the InCommon people.
Yeah, either Tommy or Ethan, do you have any knowledge about the IP support in the connectors? That sounds like a new one.
Maybe Chris Hubing. I mean, we haven't had any issues with it, but.
Chris Hubing says yes, and he would be in a position to know. So if you want to expand on that one word answer, Chris, that'd be fine, but we'll take it from there for now. So, and that would be a good one to follow up on, say, with your comments on the evaluation. Maybe we can get a fuller answer for that. Thanks, Lacey. I appreciate that. And then our next and third presenter here would be Tommy Doan from Southern Methodist University. So Tommy, it's your turn in the spotlight.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Hello, everyone. Just a bit of background, if you can proceed to the next slide. So currently at SMU, we have a custom-built provisioning system that's built on PeopleSoft. So that was developed by an internal resource at SMU, and it's been running for about 10 years now, and it does well managing our university members, and by that we mean our employees and our students. And it does a decent job also at managing other users who need our IT services. So those we call our sponsored users. They're neither employees nor students, but they need some of our services. But we do a less good job managing those populations. And currently PeopleSoft has historically been the only source of record for identities that we have been concerned about. So let's move to the next slide. So that brings us to our what's coming up for us, and so we've found some new motivation to move our provisioning system really to grow it into a full IAM program, and a big part of that for us is going to be to transition our provisioning system out of PeopleSoft to its own independent system. So we do plan to be on PeopleSoft as a university for the foreseeable future. There's no plans to move away from PeopleSoft. However, as we will begin supporting additional sources of record, it makes less sense to have our identity management system built on top of any single product. So we want to move that out to its own independent system. And so some of those additional sources of record are listed here, and none of them, in many cases, have anything to do with PeopleSoft. So let's move to the next slide. So some of the challenges that we foresee in the new transitioning to a new model will be ingesting those identities from multiple sources of record and dealing with matching identities from any two systems and not creating multiple identities in our central identity store for the same person. So if we have Tommy Doan in PeopleSoft and we also have Tommy Doan in the non-credit SIS system, we need our central identity management system to recognize those are the same individual and merge the identities from both systems together. Also, we need ability to group our populations, our users, into meaningful populations, and that will be for access control, for provisioning services, for joining listservs, all types of provisioning targets. And the other challenge that we foresee is that we definitely want to enhance our sponsorship model and do a better job at doing real-time enrollments for certain types of guests. We'll also have other types of guests that may need to be invited to participate and to receive IT services from us. So those are called here transient users. Longer term users may fall into either one of the self-enrollment or invitation categories. And then we also have employee equivalent users who are hired through one or more contracting agencies on our campus. Next slide. So some of the major components that we feel that we lack and are looking at TAP components to help us are that central person registry. So this would be where identity data would be collected from all identity sources. It would contain demographic data, affiliation data, contact information, that sort of thing, enough information to allow us to perform that match that I spoke about. And it would also house that data for a long term and handle duplicate management automatically and administratively, and possibly also allow account linking so that users would be able to link their identity from one system to their identity in a different system, and potentially also offer ability for social logon at some point. Our grouping system that I mentioned previously would allow us to select individuals into meaningful groups such as employees and students, and to a fine amount of detail so that we can use those groups or cohorts in meaningful ways. Also, our guest management system needs an overhaul, and we are interested in multiple ways that we could approach that. And finally, we want to replace our provisioning system and be able to support additional provisioning targets and complete with auditing and tracking and visibility so that authorized users will be able to see what services have been provisioned to what cohorts. Yeah, so next slide. One more.
Sorry, Tommy, did I jump ahead too far?
Nope, we need to go advance one more.
One more, okay.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, sorry, one more again. Thanks, Dean. So the things that we're considering to meet the challenges are commercial IAM solutions. And we have interviewed several, but we have concerns in the complexity of a higher ed environment for their ability to manage the sponsored populations and also for their grouping mechanisms. So that brings us to the open source opportunities, and this is what attracted us to the CSP program. We really our eyes were opened to the TAP components going through this program, especially the maturity, the capabilities, and the adoption of the TAP components has been quite impressive. And so we definitely have those opportunities listed here as an option. And then the third option would be some combination of commercial solutions and open source solutions.
Tommy,
So,
I noticed that we've got a question here. It looks like this is to you and the other two panelists. Question is, after getting TIER set up through the Collaboration Success Program, what are your plans for ongoing support? What options are available for getting support for the components, now called the Trusted Access Platform components, that is Grouper, SHIB, Midpoint, Co-Manage, and for integrating them? So if each of the three of you could take a minute to comment on how you're planning to get that support and what your options are.
Yeah, so this is Tommy, and I'll just jump in quickly to say that one of the benefits of going through the CSP has been Slack channels with direct access to universities that have deployed the products and have experience with them, and also in many cases, access to the developers who can answer very complex questions for us.
And I guess I can go next. Just for us, I would also highlight the community support that's available there, both from other universities and Internet 2 itself, and then the mentioned via Internet 2 having access to some pretty key developers is really, really wonderful. We do also sometimes hire consulting groups. So for example, we've brought in Unicon in the past to augment our identity management team to work on trusted access platform components. And there's, I think, a couple of companies now that can also help with Midpoint and things like that. So that it's a little bit better picture than running a completely home developed solution for us from a commercial standpoint, commercial support standpoint.
Yeah, I would just say pretty. Oh, did you want me to talk about it, or?
Yes, please. Yes, by all means.
Okay. Yeah, the Slack channels have been very helpful to us, and I think we get to remain on those moving forward even after we've completed the program. So having access to the main developers has been huge in getting this rolled out, and the training that's offered through the CSP has also been very helpful. And I think that we might continue to do training after April with Co-Manage and Midpoint if needed. So those are always available to anyone. Yep.
Oh, all right, thanks. Thanks to all three of you. The panelists have been joined by Chris Hubing, who is the Internet 2 fellow that really does a lot of the development and rollout of these services for Internet 2 internally. And so I would say this is a great opportunity to ask further questions about Docker or containerization or CI/CD, those kinds of things. So if anybody has questions along that line, we do have someone that would probably be a good person to answer them.
And I'll just say that that's the end of my slide deck, so I'll turn it over to Keith.
All right, thanks, Tommy. At this point, we'd like to see if folks have interest in learning any more about this. So if you could go, yes, forward to there. We have some links here for you if what you've been hearing from these folks makes you interested in possibly participating in the next cohort of this, which will be 2021. And it's very easy to start, and there's no commitment at that stage of the work, which is just to, as it says in number 1, complete a brief expression of interest. Use the form at the SurveyMonkey list anytime between now and the end of June. We'll accept all those, read through them, and then reach out by phone probably, or Zoom, to talk to each of the campuses that submitted that form, find out a little more about what you're planning to do, and probably point you at the training opportunities as well. If you want to see a bit more about the program details and fees, look at the CSP details page on bullet 4, page 4. And then other questions, any questions actually about the InCommon Trusted Access Platform CSP program, email help@incommon.org or visit the Academy, InCommon Academy wiki page for more information. Next slide, I think probably just says, yes. So if you look back over the 3 cases that we discussed today, you could probably fit them into 1 or more of these 4, I would say, common high-level problem sets that people are trying to either improve or add to their IAM infrastructure. So managing access is, a lot of the stuff that Grouper is helping with, and then provisioning solutions like Midpoint also help getting that information out to where it needs to take effect. At least 2, if not 3 of the campuses are working on adding guest systems support or better guest system support. We didn't talk a lot in this set of cases about scholarly collaborations, but research support is something we've really been trying to improve our capability for, and we have the tools, CoManage in particular, that will allow people to sort of form their own collaborations and add the tools they need to those. And finally, yes, we're all involved in managing the life cycle. Students apply, faculty are hired, faculty retire or get promoted, students become alums, all those kinds of things. And how do you manage the transition from one to the next? And again, that's a set of tasks that the CSP program can help with, and the Trusted Access Platform packages can give you the tools to put it together. So that's maybe just by way of stimulating your thinking of the kinds of problems you might bring as you think about this. Looking to see if there are any more questions. I guess not. So maybe we go to the next slide, which probably is that, questions. All right, so that's fine. We can go on to the next one. So given our adventures with the COVID-19 and the measures we're taking to cope with that, the decisions has been made to offer our training courses in a virtual mode, long distance video mode versus in person. And that's affecting our CoManage, our Grouper, and our SHIB training in the next round. That's CoManage training May 19-20, Grouper June 2nd, 3rd, SHIBboleth sometime July, August. Again, if you go to the InCommon.org/academy, you will be able to find details about that training. In a way, this should lower the barrier for people to participate in the training, because you can subtract all the travel and lodging costs. But we're all, improvising as things go with this this latest excitement. So next slide. There's the base camp. Many of you are probably familiar with base camps and advanced camps. This one, at this point, is still scheduled to be face-to-face in person in Milwaukee, June 23rd to 25th. It's great if you're just getting started with this or in the early stages of wanting to know more about either the components or the packages or the integration of them. And the link at the bottom of this slide will take you to all the information, including registration links for that. So definitely pay attention. I think people have learned a lot from those and gone on to become some of our best friends and contributors. And finally, one more. For every one of these IAM Online, we encourage participants to go to this IAM Online survey out with SurveyMonkey. Click that link and please give us feedback, plus, minus, things you'd like to see different, things you feel were not dealt with in enough detail or too much. All those kinds of things are good information for the program organizers here at IAM Online. I'm looking over at the chat again, and I'll just read a couple quotes here. Midpoint training I see is also going to be available in June. That's coming up as well, a second round of midpoint training. Lacey, I'll say, so Tommy said, Michael, at SMU, we currently have a very small IAM team. So the percent of the team involved is quite high, but it really needs to be so. So yes, big projects need you know, a lot of resources. So there's that. And then Lacey added that about 30% of their IAM team is dedicated to the grouper rollout, just that one thing. And the Academy software training, Aaron put in chat the link to that information. And Ethan added in that it's probably about 15% of their staff. Several people working on it, none of them fully part-time. And Steve Zappi put the link in the chat so you can just click it right there and get to our evaluation. So I would say we're in good shape. We're early, so if there are any late breaking questions from people, we could go ahead and raise those now. And if not, thank you for your feedback, and we'll keep your eye on the schedule for future IAM online topics. And thanks for joining us today. So long until then. Dean, did you have any final comments to throw in?
Nope. So thank you, Keith, for moderating today, and thank you to Ethan, Lacey, and Tommy for the presentations. Next IAM Online is April 8th, and we're going to talk about schools who have experience with two-factor authentication. So thanks, everybody.